published authors, writers, and content creators discussing both the creative and technical sides of writing, as well as the industry surrounding it, from novels to screenplays to comics and more. And now, here's your host, author Travis I. Sivart.
Hey, thank you, Cogsley. Appreciate that. Welcome to Write Night, everybody. And remember, for everybody who's hanging out and viewing, let us know in chat what you're reading or what your current writing project is. I'm Travis Sivart, and the book I'm going to talk about that I published tonight is actually under the pen name of Joe Wilson, my children's book of 201 of the Worst Dad Jokes. You're welcome. So this is just a bunch of one-liner dad jokes that I put out a while back, and I feel it relates to tonight's topic, which I totally forgot to change. But yeah, it's funny book business, and that where we're going to talk about comedy in novel writing, as well as in the second hour, the technical hour, discuss things such as comic books, where we're going to lean a lot on John there and pressure him. Other than that, let's go clockwise from above me, starting just above my head here. We've got Michael. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Thompson. I am an independent author and illustrator. One of my books is Winslow Hoffner's Incredible Encounters. It's a folkloric fantasy on the high seas, cryptids, sea monsters, action-adventure, and lots of humor in the dialogue. Check it out. I'm currently writing the sequel, and I'm very excited to get it out and share it with you all.
I'm very excited about that, too. And Aaron has just finished reading that book last week. And here's what I'm going to say. I don't often interrupt them during their intros. I mean, no more than absolutely necessary, which is every week. Really, check that book out, guys. It is a great storytelling experience with some good, fun research in it. A lot of personality to the characters. It's a beautiful book. Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Michael. I hate to be honest in front of you and your mother, but I'll do it if I must. John.
I'm John from Jersey's Cards and Comics. That's our host store. I'm also with Conquest Comics. You can check out what we're doing at conquestuniverse.com. I did bring out a bit of artwork that people have been asking me, what's on your shirt? So...
Awesome.
Now, which character is that?
One of the characters for Emissary Wars. He is the Electrocutioner.
Good name.
He is the avatar of the Indian god of storms and death. Of all the less humorous things to be.
Thank you, Michael, for being the link master.
Doing my best.
Now, John, in comics, do you do much comedy in comics?
Well, believe it or not, I mean, that used to be a big genre probably in the 30s and the 40s. You had... it just started kind of dying off. It became more political satire in modern days, I guess.
That's still comedy.
I mean, it is. It's a little less slapstick type of humor.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Now let me introduce kind of our special guest, because it's the first time he's on Write Night. Though many of my regular viewers will know him from Talk of the Tavern for years now. And somebody I'd like to call a close personal friend in public, but he tells me to shut the hell up and don't do that to him. Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Good evening, my name's Kevin Carew. I am Talk of the Tavern's token minority, the only Brit on the show. I've had a couple of minor forays into the writing world. Tonight's topic is comedy. Travis and I actually produced a book together, although Travis appeared under a pen name. The now infamous, and rightly so, Drowning Kittens for Fun and Profit.
Hold it up again.
More on that later.
You let him get a good look at that cover. Pull it back just a little bit. There you go. So yeah, you guys could check that out. A cat going into a toilet. By the way, all the artwork in the book was done by me with a Sharpie on printer paper and then scanned in and cleaned up.
Nice.
And if I must,
it is available to colour in during your reading experience.
It is. And look at that. Mike even got that. Mike, you are rocking the links, dude. It's
trying to channel my inner Aaron.
Which Aaron did just message he will be joining us in about 20 minutes. So And here's what I'll tell you about Kevin. In that book, Drowning Kittens for Fun and Profit, 101 of the worst money-making ideas, Kevin was the true wit behind it. I might think fast on my feet and say surprising things that creates laughter, but Kevin is genuinely clever and witty in the way that I feel like it is. There's a cattail like directly in front of my face. That's comedy. That I feel is a trademark of British writing. I feel like when I go for comedic writing, there's some great American ones out there and other countries, but British often top my list. So, how about we start with that? Where do you guys think the best comedy writers come from? And by that I mean in book form, for the most part, though of course we can segue into movies or television or whatever that the books had led to. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we go on, Tracy, how are you? Thank you for joining us. Everybody else, don't forget if you're a streamer to throw it into the stream, that exclamation point me, and let people know where to follow you, especially if you're a writer. That's what we're here for. So I did want to welcome John's friend again, Real Holy Link. Thank you for coming and hanging out. Appreciate your company there. John says you're just starting to pick up on some writing stuff. And for you writers there that are hanging out, let us know either, well, if you're writing something, let us know about your latest project. Give us an elevator pitch. Give us a link if you want, if it's up for sale, whatever. And for you, those that aren't writing, let us know what you're reading right now. Pop it right into chat. We might not address it on the live stream, but it's always good to give those recommendations, especially to those smaller authors that you're supporting, like ourselves. Other than that, the usual pimping of things. If you're watching us live, don't forget to scroll down below that screen, and you can follow us on podcast, whether it's the Dungeons and Dragons game, Talk of the Tavern, or this show itself. It's on almost a dozen different distributors, including places like iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Deezer, Podcast Addict, Stitcher, Podchaser, and so on. If you are listening via podcast, don't forget you can join us live and in person via electronic chat that we read when we feel like it at twitch.tv/Travis Tavern Talk. Okay, I think I'm done with all that, right? I got it all? Did I miss anything? Okay.
I think it's the inside leg measurement.
Oh, 33. But I'm getting older, so I'm sure it's almost down to a 32.
That's what happens.
Write it down, you 6-foot hulking giant. And Kevin, for those that are new to Kevin.
I envy you, yeah. You mere mortals who can just walk in and buy a pair of jeans off the rail. This mythical shopping experience.
Because Kevin, you're what, 6'7", 620? Something?
6'8".
6'8".
Wow.
6'8". 6'8", 36.5-inch inside leg.
There we go. So,
Which, curiously enough, is a phrase that strikes fear into hearts a lot more than, for example, I've got a knife. You just try that. Walking as a tall guy, just walk into a clothing store and say 36.5-inch inside leg, and just watch the color drain from their face.
But the ladies and some of the gentlemen are excited. A 36 what? Is that metric?
Years old.
Okay, so I feel quite often the Brits have a leg up when it comes to comedy in the written form. I love the dry humor because it's quite often what I like to use myself. And I have some great comedic reads that I'll be talking about. But what about you guys? Do you think the Brits have a bonus on this one? To their die roll?
I don't know if you could say necessarily that Brits are funnier, because comedy is subjective.
True.
But I think British writers have a tendency to be a little bit more florid, a little bit more throwaway with their words and their descriptiveness. And we do have a strong tendency towards bitter and self-deprecating, ironic humour, which is, I always think, an easy form of humour to laugh at, because you're laughing at somebody else's misfortune. So maybe that plays to it to a certain extent.
That's a fair point. What about you, Michael?
I enjoyed a lot of humor in comic strips when I was young,
Mm-hmm.
and in the cartoons that I watched. And my friends and I, to this day, we quote SpongeBob constantly.
He's
Um,
British, isn't he?
no.
He's in the Northeast Atlantic, right?
Oh yeah. But yeah. So we have, I guess, and that's sort of entered meme culture a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
we have memes a lot, and which is basically like a big inside joke that you share with everyone, which when everyone's in on it, it suddenly becomes funny just because you're part of something. So
That's a great
uh,
definition of memes, because memes used to have to be standalone funny that anybody can
right.
get, and now they don't have to be, but they also only last 3 days now instead of 3 years.
That's true. That's true. The lifespan has shortened, but like amid groups, I think people have their personal memes that you hang on to, and then it like becomes an inside joke again, but in a smaller sense. So like with my friends and I, we have like group chats named after like certain memes and stuff, and like the little bubble will be some character or something.
I just inside joked and memed all over the chat there.
Oh yeah.
I did the emote I just put up is actually from Talk of the Tavern, and it's from Ed when he would do This Week in History. His intro, when I'm like, "What happened this week in history?" He'd be like, "Shit happens, y'all." And I made that emote after him, or in honor of his little catchphrase there.
For the love of God, don't use mine.
I think I actually removed it because it wasn't readable. It just on that
Mm.
small thing, and instead I have things like this instead. So there we go. John, what about you? Your thoughts on British versus?
Well, I think you have to kind of look at historically where a lot of it kind of started off. So if you go back to the really older times, I thought Irish humor actually was very sharp and
Like
very
Oscar Wilde?
clever in stuff that they did. Um, British humor kind of flourished a lot in the late '60s and the
Mm-hmm.
'70s. I mean, I don't want to get into television shows and stuff like that because it's not really writing per se. I mean, even Shakespeare had comedy, cleverly blend in with his writing. So, but so throughout history, different time periods tended to be, you know, different cultures for me had different uh, had a foothold, I should say,
That definitely makes
in those
sense.
things. So,
It's By the way, something I suggested in Discord that I'll define real quick. I mentioned we should have a write-in, and that would be a 2-hour show where we all just write on our current projects and chit chat during them. It's
Interesting. Yeah, I
sleepover.
wasn't sure what a write-in was, but I was intrigued.
It's like a sleepover with writing.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Irish humor, John. I am remembering how much I love that because my grandfather is of Irish descent, or was of 100% Irish descent, and I learned all of the jokes that I tell at parties from him, and they're all like these long stories like coated with misdirection, and then and then ultimately some sharp punchline or a pun or something, and I love those.
Like
my,
Bobo
my
the
one
Clown.
grandfather was that way also, but he was Welsh, and I couldn't understand what the hell he was. I figured it was funny because he was laughing. So,
Now, Michael, do you have a shorter one of those you could tell as an example?
Oh, I'm trying to think of what's appropriate. Hey, give me a second.
Because otherwise, we've got to bring Aaron in when he shows up and have him tell Bobo the Clown.
Oh, Bobo the Clown, yeah.
maybe he'll
Definitely.
be here in the second.
What's that, John?
I said maybe he'll make it into the second hour, so you won't have to worry about Bubba the Clown.
He should be really get him to the technical part. We could dodge the Bobo bullet. Well, while Michael is thinking of that joke, why don't we talk about some of our favorite works, whether they were primarily comedic or not? And we can touch on writing comedy, which we've done before on other shows. Aaron should be joining us in just a second. Let's take a pause then and reintroduce the subtopic right here once he's popped in. Because he just said on deck calling in. So we're going to pause just a moment and stare expectantly at this screen we were already staring at. And thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Oh, there he is there. Hold on, let me switch our screens. There we go. Look at that. It all lined up good because I just did a readjust. Oh, by the way, I wore a comedic shirt tonight.
Indeed. P when I laugh.
Which this
I
applies
do that
more
'cause I'm
so.
old.
What's that, John?
I do that because I'm old and I can't get to the bathroom.
There we go.
fast
Yeah,
enough.
it is a certain group, and it applies a lot more to women who, especially women who have had experienced childbirth. But I wear it just because I don't pee by accident when I laugh. So, Aaron, quick intro for
Hi.
you.
Quick intro. Hi, I'm Aaron Kennedy, author of Persona Non Grata, the Ships of Valor series. Been a technical writer for about 25 years. Thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate that. I still gotta get on Amazon because I don't see those sales, and I assume you bought it from them.
Yeah, I got it from Amazon.
Aaron, lift your mic just a little bit, please.
Oh, sorry. Thank
Yep,
you.
There you go. And by the way, Michael has been taking over your linking duties, and wow, he's putting you to
Oh.
shame. Yeah, you should.
Well,
just...
he's young and fast, but can he go the distance?
We'll
I
see.
can go the distance.
So we were just we spoke a little bit about how I feel British. I just like their humor better, and it seems to flow better in their writing. But now we've shifted to some of our, and it was right as you're coming in, so we haven't even started talking about it. Our favorite comedic works, whether the book was meant to be a comedy, if it has like one scene in it or one moment in it that just really hit your funny bone, or what have you. So that's what we're just going into right now. And Aaron, you do know Kevin from previously, correct?
Yes,
yeah, we've met briefly on once
Okay.
before. Yeah.
And to refresh you on this, Kevin is also a infamous across the world blogger, though he took a break, and he's going back into it as we speak. But he's also the
Ooh.
co-author of my book written under the pen name of Ada Dickey, Drowning Kittens for Fun and Profit. There we go. So, so you know his credentials to set that up for you. Okay, so favorite comedic works or books with comedic moments? Aaron?
Sir Terry comes to mind almost immediately. The Discworld series, Good Omens, which has recently had the television adaptation, which is frankly amazing because it actually lines up with the book very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
Not only in structure but thematic elements. You get the feel that you're in the universe they created as opposed to an adaptation of the universe they created. Like Harry Potter, yeah, it's thematically correct, but it's not the same place. Whereas Good Omens, it feels like you're reading the book. There are minor nuances, but it's there. What you got, Kevin?
I was hugely impressed by Good Omens, and I love that book and have done ever since I was given it by my school librarian, I think, when I was about 12 or 13. And I was really skeptical about it because it's one of those, this is such a great book to me. It's one of those standout. I've read it so many more times since the first time. I can always go back to it. It's like an old faithful, if you like. One of those, you can just never get bored of reading it. And so I was horrendously sort of scared when they first announced it. I was like, oh, please don't screw this up for me.
Oh.
And at first when it came out, I really didn't want to watch it. I actually had to work my way up to doing it. And when I did, I was nothing but rewarded. I was so heartened by how faithfully they'd stuck to it.
Especially with Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman's a hard person to adapt because they've done a bunch of his stuff, whether it's Neverwhere, American Gods.
Even
Sir Terry-
Stardust.
Oh, exactly. Stardust is a great movie, but it's not the same as the book.
If
It doesn't have the same feel to it.
I could throw in my 2 cents here. With American Gods, go get the audiobook with, I believe the narrator's name is George Guidall, Guidall or something along those lines. incredible narration. I'm reading another book just because he was the narrator via audiobook. And yeah, just really hit it on the head. And as for the television series, American Gods Season 1 sticks really super close to the book. It was beautiful. Season 2, it's almost a different story. But I appreciate both sides of that and understand both sides of that. But, no, Neil Gaiman is one of the ones in my current library where he's not writing a comedy, but there is comedy throughout the whole thing, which is kind of like life. Very rarely do you have life that's all drama without somebody saying some stupid ass thing that makes you go, not now. So what about you, John? You got some?
That was particularly probably comedy was probably Breakfast of Champions, Vonnegut. I tended to like a lot of Piers Anthony's books because it had a very light feel as it kind of went through it and stuff, and there was comedy mixed up. I don't. There's no particular book that other than probably Breakfast of Champions, that I picked it up because it was humorous per se.
I'll tell you what, I was a huge Piers Anthony fan in my teens. Piers Anthony was pretty much my transition point from what they now would call chapter books to full-length novels. And I probably picked my first one up when I was in 7th grade, so that would be 12 years old or so. And it was one of the Xanth novels, Ogre. And from there I was hooked. And
well, you do like puns.
I do.
And those things were full of puns.
But it could have been because of him I like puns.
Right. And it's one of those, because I've only read like one of the Xanth novels, but the thing that I remember the most of it is when they run into an earthquake and the characters are talking about no-fault insurance.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I remember about that book, but it's a stupid pun.
I remember shoe fly pies with their leathery hide flying away, and they would try to catch them for dessert and all these sorts of things. Now, before we go on about that, because I so want to just branch over to Robert Asprin, but which I know.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll head that direction in a minute. Let's give Michael a chance to throw out a couple of his favorites.
Okay. Do you want to hear the joke?
Oh yeah, he's got a joke
I just remember.
Is it about Bobo the Clown?
No, it's not Bobo the Clown, but you're next, okay? We're gonna make Bobo canon in Right Night. So this is one of my grandfather's jokes. Okay, so this takes place in Ireland. So Paddy and Malloy are digging a hole, and then up at the top of the hole, Seamus, their buddy, is sitting on his barrel. And Paddy looks at Malloy and he says, Hey Malloy, why are you and me down in this hole digging while Seamus is up there sitting and doing no work? And then Malloy says, oh, I don't know, but I'm gonna find out. So he climbs up out of the hole, and he gets up there and he gets into Seamus's face and he says, Seamus, why are you up here sitting on your barrel while me and Paddy are doing all the work down in the hole? And Seamus says, well, I've got something called brains. And then Malloy says, what's brains? And he says, I'll show you. And so he's like, follow me. So he goes up to this big metal rod that's sticking out of the earth, and he puts his hand over it. And he says, I want you to hit me hand as hard as you can. He says, hit your hand. He says, aye, hit me hand as hard as you can. He says, all right, well, get ready for this. So he pulls back his fist, and then he just wails. And at the last second, Seamus pulls his hand away, and his crunch, and he breaks his knuckles. And he's like, ah! And Seamus says, that's brains. And then he sits back down again. And so with his busted gammy hand, Malloy gets back down into the hole, and he starts digging one-handedly in the hole. And then Paddy says, did you find out why we're doing all the work? And he says, aye, he's got brains. And then Paddy says, what's brains? And Malloy says, I'll show ya. Hit me hand. There you go.
That's a good one. It's,
funny books. I really like Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes. And
Yes.
That's going back to it's going back to comic strips, but they're so smart, and he's a 6-year-old kid, but his vocabulary is gigantic, and I mean I love words, and it was just hilarious, and the layer of his imagination over the real world, and then plus the visual element of Watterson's expressions was incredible, and I learned a lot about drawing by looking at his expressions, and that adds a whole new layer to the joke.
I think that is a great point. Because when you said Calvin and Hobbes, I immediately went, no, I had the books full of these comic strips. I bought them and they were great, and I'd reread them. And I don't. Has anybody here tried to draw a weekly, let alone a daily comic strip? Because I did in
No.
Not daily, but I mean I've done Chicken Boy, and I worked on that, every day for especially this fourth one. That one took a long time,
right.
so I've got kind of a sense of.
See, I
of that.
tried to do it like back in high school before we had the internet,
Mm-hmm.
and I tried to look at doing it later again once we did have internet with a gaming theme, a fantasy gaming role playing game theme. And yeah, to come up with these witticisms that often that are genuinely good. I mean, we could look at, let's face it, Garfield and Peanuts, they ran old after, 12 years. You're like, okay, you should stop while you're ahead. Do what Far Side did and quit while it's still good. Let's see, Word comments now. I started one. I even had the idea of doing 30 strips ahead of time. Let's see, and Danny says shoves attempts at stick figures into Abyss. John?
Well, and I learned under many of the people that did serial strips and stuff like that. And typically, most of your pieces are only done once a week anyway. But a lot of them are just panel shots that are put together.
Mm-hmm.
But believe you me, it has to be about the funny. It doesn't have to be about your technical. I mean, it doesn't hurt to be a good technical illustrator, but I mean, Peanuts didn't get to where it was at, or Kathy, or any of those, based off of the wonderful drawing that they had. But typically, just like in the comic book industry, you're on about the same schedule. You're drawing as many panels per week is what you're doing.
Aaron?
Go ahead, Aaron.
Thinking about panels and stuff like that in the panel comics, for the classic 3 or 4 across, like a Garfield skit, friggin' for a word count, an actual word count of description and stuff like that, that's got to be 4,000 or 5,000 words of content there if you were to write it out. Just to get, thinking, okay, you got the heart of the joke, but to get it condensed down into that nice, tight thing that's publishable every day or every week.
That's actually the hard part of that writing, in my opinion, is boiling it down so it's so concise that in 3 panels and less than 50 words, the length of a tweet is essentially what you're doing for this joke.
Exactly.
John?
Well, at the break, what I'll do is I'll go get some original strips and stuff and show you guys, what size they are and what they look like.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that will work out great for the second hour where we talk about it, not just, modern comic books that I'm sure we'll focus on, but these other things like that, because it's a huge topic if you look at it from a couple different directions.
Right.
So, okay.
I mean,
Mhm.
oh, go ahead.
Go on, Aaron.
You were going to mention Robert Rossiter. I'm going to skip. I want to skip him for just a second because we got into Neil Gaiman. But John Constantine, a character like that, that's Alan Moore does that. But that is a comedic character in a dark world, and it's all the wit, kind of like your Sterling Archers,
Right.
and things like that, who all kind of pay homage to this guy that's talking.
Or
He's a mouthpiece. Deadpool. Oh yeah, absolutely. Rob
Deadpool
Liefeld.
must be hell doing book 30. Yeah, John?
Rob Liefeld has nothing to do with Deadpool being who Deadpool is.
Right.
Oh yeah.
That's the biggest argument with the comic book industry is the writing group or the team that made Deadpool what he was should get the credit for the current Deadpool, not the guy that drew all the pouches and stuff on his costume. For given that character as a throwaway character and they turned Deadpool into what he is.
Oh,
And they
absolutely.
credit for it. Rob Liefeld had, I mean, I'm not taking away from Rob Liefeld, but he didn't write the current incarnation of Deadpool.
Yeah.
He's a good writer, believe it or not, though, too. Rob Liefeld is, but he
I don't
didn't
think
set the
there's-
tone for the modern Deadpool.
This is why writers in that sort of situation, rotating them through after 12 to 15 to 20 comics, is important. But even when you get a new writer on there, you see him reheating the same jokes. And to have that running joke, that classic cliche that they cling to, that's great. But you can't just rewrite all the same jokes again and again and again for years to come. This is why you cut series off, even if there's a demand for it. Aaron, you were saying something after about you didn't want to go to Robert Asprin.
I want to. Why? When we were talking about Gaiman, he leans a little bit darker, a little bit into the
Right.
into the shadows of things. Not necessarily horror or suspense. He's not a.
He's very cerebral.
He is. But you get these characters like Constantine. That's an Alan Moore character, and freaking Alan Moore was definitely much more into the dark side. But he's got this one kind of mouthpiece. And when I was mentioning Deadpool is a mouthpiece. What makes him
Right.
great is not his skills or anything like that. It's how he talks. But that goes back to Spider-Man, Stan Lee's Spider-Man way back when, who Spider-Man talks when he fights because he's scared to death. That's his release, which I think is part of the reason that the modern writers have created this idolization from Deadpool's perspective onto Spider-Man. He's the hero that he wants to be, and you see all these little homages to it. Like, Deadpool talks when he fights. Spider-Man talks when he fights. That is a... why is Travis punny? Because Travis liked Piers Anthony way back when. Things like that.
Now, Wordowin here says, Robert Asprin, I grew up laughing at his books, tried to reread some. They didn't age as well as I'd like. So I'm going to move us over to that, and here's what I'll tell you. I'll intro this topic. First of all, there's his Thief World and his fantasy books. I'm going to set those aside, because I never found those all that entertaining or interesting. His Myth series, and not as much, but Fool's Army, or Fool's...
The Fool's Errand,
Thank you.
yeah.
Those books, I liked them. Kevin, you got a buzz if you want to mute yourself while you're checking that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I started rereading these out loud to Andrea and doing the voices for it. And in that format, they seem to hold their content. But I'm wondering now if I went and reread them. No, it's not Fool's Navy, Word to Win. But,
Yeah, A Fool and His Money, Fool's, it's the Fool series.
Fool's
There's like
Company.
5 of them.
That's what it is. Fool's
Yep.
Company. And it's very F-Troop in space. It's, but no, I always liked Robert Asprin, and as far as I know, I'll tell you what, his first 3 books, or 4 books, were better than anything after that. When he started branching out, because he had to, he kind of ran out of that story and ran it into the ground. And when he expanded beyond that and started doing the Myth Adventure, or the Company,
Mm-hmm.
where he would alternate, here's a personal story about the Claude, what's his name? The main character. And Oz.
Skeeve.
Skeeve and Oz. And then he'd do one about the group of them that they had put together to build this kind of shyster, interdimensional trading company, adventurer, bodyguard thing. By the way, one of my favorite books of his is the one with the cows, if anybody remembers that one.
Oh, the Vampire Cows?
Thanks for the spoiler.
You know what? The book's been out 10 years. It's okay.
It's probably been out 25 years. But yeah. John?
Well, I mean, going back and rereading comedy and, saying that it didn't age well, it's pretty tough if you already know what the punchline is and stuff. I mean, I don't think any book's going to age well if you know if that's the gist of the book, per se.
Also, writing styles have changed in the past 30-plus years. So delivery is different. And, of course, he based these books from the interview or the author's note or whatever I read. to be similar in heart and mind to the road movies with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby, I believe it was. Where you've got this buddy movie, and you kind of have your straight guy who's a little worldly, and you kind of have the wide-eyed moron and they get into these misadventures. So he was rehashing something from previous, and so yeah, I think on a reread you're definitely going to lose something. But how long does comedy hold up, John?
And that's the thing we talked about throughout history, how comedy had kind of evolved and how things kind of keep up with those particular things. It's comedy obviously also usually follows politics and other events and stuff throughout history and other genres. So, I mean, it's going to age, just because it will.
Aaron?
That goes back to the comic side of things as well. For you take a look at the early Spider-Man drawing techniques and things like that, and some of that was technology based, where you're dealing with 3-4 colors to create this world, and then we expand into the modern era where you're using computers, drawing things on panels, have a much cleaner paper to work with, and you end up with a completely different art form. But the stories, for the most part, and this is one that I hated, was A Brand New Day in Spider-Man, where they wiped Spidey and Mary Jane's memory. Spoilers. To kind of reset the universe again.
Yeah.
Well, because they said, hey, for a Spider-Man story, you don't need all these other interpersonal type things going on. We need Spider-Man, and we need to get back to his roots, which was a great concept. I don't know that it was necessarily well executed at the time, but you see this evolution of how we're trying to get from point A to point B while retaining the essence that we had at the very beginning.
Now, John, hold on to that thought about the paper. I saw your reaction there. Keep that for a second hour.
I
Write
saw
a
it
note,
too.
because I think that might be something interesting to talk about. Michael?
I wanted to throw a question out to you guys, because we're talking about comics, and we mentioned Deadpool, and I wanted to know if any of you have ever done any fourth wall breaks in your books.
All the time in the book I'm writing right now. Go ahead, Aaron.
Oh, yeah?
And then John. Aaron, then John.
Kind of. The fourth wall break for me happens in the narration style. And you'll see Airy almost talking to the audience at points when he's highlighting things. So I took a very much, he's not talking in the presence, he's telling a war story and relaying things. That's why he doesn't talk in it, because he's talking to the audience. And some of the dialogue that he highlights are fourth wall breaks. Like almost any time that Lisha is talking to him, she's talking through him as a mouthpiece to get that kind of feel.
And John, fourth wall?
Well, we actually discussed it as a company to put Deadpool in a couple of our comics to poke the beast a bit, because they say he can be anywhere. So,
Oh, really?
why can't he be there? It's like, we don't know if we're going to do it. But
How's that work with
Hey, I'm a
comic?
copyright violation.
Well, on that note, friggin', you'll see Deadpool wearing
DC shirts.
his Hogwarts stuff.
Okay.
In the second hour, I'll bring in some of the con artwork that we did, where we have Deadpool hidden, like in Wonder Woman and other things.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, but he wears his Hogwarts stuff. Deadpool is a Hufflepuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because they said no, we can't make him a Slytherin and we can't make him a Gryffindor, and he sure as hell ain't a Ravenclaw. So he's a Hufflepuff.
Yes,
And
sir.
when
It's Michael, repeat your question in case there's more content there.
Oh, I was interested if
Fourth wall.
the fourth wall and how you did it, and
So I know Kevin does it all the time in his blogging.
mhm.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, not all the time. Yeah, I get where you're coming from, though. The blog was kind of a weird thing. By the end of it, or by the point where I stopped it a couple of years back, I kind of taken on a bit of a persona. And it was never a conscious choice to do that. I never launched it as, hi, this is who I'm going to be. But I did make a conscious decision that I didn't want it to be a blog about me.
Right.
You know, I wasn't going on there like, and no disrespect to the people who do it, but I wasn't going on there as some housewife sharing recipes. I didn't want to share stories about my pets and things like that. I was an angry, violent young man with an awful lot of angry, violent stuff to say, and people reacted to that humorously because I portray myself humorously in an attempt not to come across as just a belligerent dick all the time.
Very sarcastic.
And that kind of, sorry, yeah, go on.
No. Finish your
No.
thoughts, because I got something after that.
Yeah, that kind of it. So without ever really meaning to, I didn't refer to myself and my real life away from the blog a great deal. But like you said, there were the odd moments where stuff like that would creep in, and you would get people who read regularly commenting underneath going, shit, I forgot there's a guy behind this. You know, that you're actually a real bloke who has a life and does things when you're not writing this stuff. So yeah, in that sense, that's a fourth wall break in a way, I suppose. It's not that I can't claim I ever put it in as a conscious vehicle, but
Mm.
You just have to say British, sir. Okay, well, he had mentioned kind of that taking on the persona. The Colbert Report was great about doing that. And he flipped on to breaking the fourth wall with little things, like his trophy case in the background where he's got the Captain America shield, the one sword, but he also had his brother on. Um, and he asked him the question, Colbert or Colbert, or Colbert, and he goes, Colbert. So that's just a breaking the wall of, yes, this is not my real persona. This is a stage presence that I've created here, which I thought was great. And it just kind of pokes the bear just a little bit, but to remind folks, oh yeah, these are things I love. Or him wanting to get knighted by Queen Noir, which it's just fun.
Right. It's in the current book I'm writing, like what Aaron mentioned in his book, it's an after the fact diary. So he's not writing it as it happened. He's writing it long after the fact. So it's almost that twisted memory that we all get of events. Michael and I once compared stories of an interaction between us, and we had a different point of view from it. So you
The
know,
unreliable narrator idea.
right, which we all are. As humans, our memories are nothing more than a recreation of an event, not an actual memory. So when we recreate these things, we fill in things differently because we had different experiences and everything. And he does that a lot, and it's fun in the book when he's talking about, you know, whether he's in 152 AD in the Mayan civilization and as it's just blossoming, or moving forward to 2030 and 2050 where he mentioned things. Word, we can address that in a minute too. But you know, he mentions, you know, use the Force, Luke, and he mentions these other things where it's bringing in very modern references which didn't happen in the moment he's talking about. These are afterthoughts. These are his thoughts breaking that fourth wall of the story and coming back. And I feel that often, that jarring out of the story, pulling you out of the story for this little bit of insight as an afterthought in hindsight, I feel that very much lends to a comedic lean where you take this very serious situation and put a little spin on it because you made it through. John?
In our use of the fourth wall, I mean, with the exception of the Deadpool thing, which was more for fun, we use the fourth wall as a tool because we have 25 different projects, but we want to have a universe that people can identify with.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how am I going to put Captain Allen in this great big huge superhero thing? Well, in the background, he might be on the television in his cartoon or whatever in the show, but we need to use that fourth wall as a bridge between all these books and stuff sometimes.
1 second,
And it's
Aaron. I
been
think
used in comics before.
when John is done, I think Kevin was about to say something. No, Aaron.
And I like where John's going with this, because I remember back in the Bronze and Golden Age, or the Bronze and Copper Age of comic books, where you'd have the notes from the editor, where it would kind of highlight where things were taking place, and it linked everything back together. Oh, when they talk about this, they don't necessarily go deep into that story. They just say, hey, see friggin' Spider-Man number 63, or to be continued in such and such.
And even more so, in the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of those little notes would be signed by their nom de plume or their nickname, and it'd have a sarcastic twist to, you know, go check this book out if you haven't bothered to collect back issues, you yuts, or whatever. Or, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. This issue has proof. Enjoy that. Whatever. And that's a fun way to break the fourth wall without breaking the story and having a character do it.
Or the cheesy cover thing. A quick cameo by the Punisher is what I remember. And he's in there for like half a second, but it doesn't do anything.
Oh, that's because you read fast. Yeah, Michael.
Do you guys watch Community at all?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess it's fresh in my mind because of the character Abed in that show, and constantly reminding the audience that it is a show, or he sees the world as television, and then but the rest of the characters are like, we're not in a show, and so I thought that was really funny, and I do the fourth wall break in some fashion, I think in every book, like especially in Chicken Boy in terms for humor. There's a moment where I literally break a fourth wall, and I'm shown in the background writing the book as it's being narrated. There's a great Deus Ex Machina joke at the end of Chicken Boy 4, which I really like. It's so meta, and it's so there's so many layers to it because one of the characters is introduced as having a particular skill with the crane game, and then there's a literal crane because they need to lower one of the characters down to the villain. And so on the crane, it's Deus Ex Machina Corporation is the engineering company for the crane, but there's an extra layer deeper to it because the term Deus Ex Machina means God from the machine, and it was in like when they would do these plays back in the old days, they would lower a statue of a god to come down by crane to solve all the mortals' problems.
Interesting.
And so it's like a 3-layer joke. It's so funny.
The nice thing about something like that, Michael, and this can go back to Robert Aspirin, if you read a book when you're young, as I did with the Myth series, and then read it again when you're older, there are layers that you didn't get when you were 14 or 15 that now you get those jokes, and it's the same comfort food content, but now it's got an extra seasoning that you would have never recognized previously. And that's one way people who are writing can create lasting content. Aaron, did you read the comment about tickling the others?
No, I missed that one, but 1 second.
I saw your hand moving, and it made me...
I'm down.
Oh. So... but no, when Michael mentioned friggin' Community, Danny Pudi plays... Yeah, that's right, lick it. Yeah, Danny Pudi, the voice of Abed, also plays Huey Duck in the new DuckTales series. Yes, he's the. For those that are not in the know, Huey Duck is the smart one. He's kind of neurotic.
It's perfect.
He is, which is what's kind of great about that. All the voice actors of that series are amazing, but you get these multi-layered jokes that kind of go through the community because you get a hint of the same personality that was there, and it just lines up. And if you didn't know he was playing it, You wouldn't.
If you ever watch Castle, Nathan Fillion would make jokes about his other series in it.
Oh yeah. What was it? Captain Hammer,
Right.
Firefly,
Right.
Space Cowboy.
Yeah. And the last episode, Community, spoilers for those that haven't seen it, they actually discuss season 7 for the whole episode and laying out how each character would frame it and do it if they can move forward into season 7. And it's all in character. It's not the actors, it is the characters talking about selling another season. And that was a very interesting, little cheesy, little dumpy, but still really intellectually fun.
Yeah, it
6
was
seasons of a movie.
Yeah.
What, Michael?
Hashtag end a movie.
Hmm.
I think it was within the theme.
Yeah.
I agree with you. It was interesting. You know, I don't think I've seen a show that tries to discuss the reason it should go on for another season, but then ultimately decides that it's a good ending within the ending of the show. So, yeah, Aaron.
It's interesting that you mentioned that it's thematically the same. The shift from season 5 to season 6, the one that was on Yahoo.
Or I think it's 4 to 5, right?
Is it 4 to 5?
I think it's 4 to 5. I think they got canceled after 4. There was, yeah, I think so, because there was another fourth wall break by Chang, as they were discussing their memories, and Abed was saying one cool for every season they had, and then between the 4th and the 5th cool, Chang farts, and then he said it's an inside joke between 4 and 5 or something. So.
But yeah, the thematic consistency. But you can definitely see where, even though they had the same writers and the same people, the producers changed. Therefore, you get this thematic twist of how things happened in it, which was kind of cool.
It did have a different feel, for sure.
So back to books. We've only got a few minutes left in the
Yeah.
first hour. How about I just recap what we kind of boiled down as the essence of writing comedy, which is it's very individual, it's very personal, it's largely based on perspective, and the bottom line is never force it, it comes out fake. So for us, we all kind of nodded along to that making it small and good, that'll work. So what about you, Kevin? When writing real life stuff, you touched on this a little bit, but you were kind of making your stuff fiction at the same time because it wasn't based on real events in your life.
Yeah, to a certain extent. You know, I very rarely describe this literally happened to me today, but I would take something and then create a scenario and discuss it subjectively as though it had happened to somebody else. Yeah.
What do you found rang most for your viewers? What struck them the most that made them comment and come back? And also, work this into you're reviving this blog. Is that correct?
I am, yeah. So this is my current project at the moment. It'll be a little while first. I suppose in a minute I really should throw a link up for it. All the old stuff is still up there. You can still go and read it. I'm currently planning a remodel. I tried an abortive relaunch. Basically, I took a break because my real life was getting in the way of consistently producing content for it. And I decided if I couldn't do it all the time as well as I had been doing it, I'd rather not do it at all than drip feed stuff out every now and then.
Right.
So the plan this time includes pre-writing a certain amount of content, and the idea is to do exactly as I did before, go in and write live, if you like. But then on weeks where I'm not able to be so productive, I've got saved up content I can use to fill that gap in, so it'll be a more consistent experience. So I'll throw a link up in Twitch in 2 seconds to it. Humor, you said it perfectly, and you can't really explain it a great deal more, but you can't force it. In fact, some of the stuff that I've had people react to with the most laughs, if you like, or the most comedic reaction to something I've written, are things I didn't think I was being that funny. And it can be something as simple as you've used a particularly amusing turn of phrase to describe something, you know, that. And I suppose a great deal I owe goes down to the fact that my father raised me on a lot of that very weird, out there, cynical British humour. Monty Python being the classic example. It's why I think I lean towards writers who use comedy in an almost eccentric and outlandish way. Robert Rankin leaps to mind. He writes plots that seem to make absolutely no sense until you tug on one thread partway through, and all of a sudden these parts magically fall together.
Douglas Adams is another
But
one.
there's just so many layers. Yeah, again, and the really great comedy writers are those, like you said, the ones with lasting content, or where there are jokes on multiple levels. And you can write a series of jokes and have them be funny, but if they're all the same kind of joke, the same type of humor, eventually, as John mentioned earlier, historically or because of a change in tastes, it's going to stop being funny.
Very good. John?
So, Kevin, do you think that they enjoyed it because they could relate to it and they could identify what was going on in their lives?
I think so, yeah. I've never... you'll see if you go and read it, but it's essentially a series of occurrences or things that inspired me to go, today I'm going to write about this or just vent about this, and I've tried to do it in a kind of humorous and light-hearted way every time, because I touch on what could be serious subjects, nothing sort of ground-shattering, but in the same way I didn't want it to be about me, I also didn't want it to come across as, like I say, serious or ranty. I can be quite cynical, as Travis knows anyway, so I think that part of my natural...
What, John? Say it again, John?
Kevin got to be the voice for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Actually,
in a way, I suppose, yeah.
No, I think that's a perfect thing when you're doing any writing. This is how you bind your readers. This is how you pull them in and keep their loyalty. You are their voice in that moment. You are sharing, in this case, comedy. They're like, yeah, exactly that, but you added something to it I wouldn't have thought of, or said it better than I ever could have. But this goes across the board for all writing, especially if you're keying on a character moment that is emotional, whether that emotion is hate, anger, hope, fear, any of that. If your reader suddenly goes, yeah, that, you've done it right. And to do it in comedy, not an easy thing. So here's what I'll say to all those people, and again I'll shout out Douglas Adams and Piers Anthony and Robert Asprin. John Moore is a modern current writer out there who does it great. Yeah, well done, and thank you to those guys and girls, men and women, gender neutral, all that. So fucking Skype, I'm sorry there. It puts the link all across his face when he puts it up. Yeah, thank you there. And also, guys, don't forget to check out Kevin on Twitter and Instagram. Are you Social Assassin on both of those, or Social Assassin UK?
The Twitter account's relatively inactive at the moment, but I think it is Social Assassin. If you really want to follow me on Instagram and see my normal boring life, which contains nothing about writing or humour other than my face, which can be quite comedic, it's Social Assassin 76.
But some beautiful imagery from the island. He has some beautiful pictures on the beach and old buildings, and Kevin is not one to just put up a picture of the stuff everybody sees every day. He definitely takes a special moment, whether that's his cat curled up in the garden next to the statue of the hedgehog or whatever else. It's well worth taking a look at. Okay, any closing thoughts on this topic before we move into the second hour? Aaron.
One quick one, because Kevin mentioned this, and I thought it was kind of apt here when you're starting to talk about writing and forcing jokes and things like that. Check out the series Arrested Development, especially the first 2 seasons. They tell these long jokes that take 4 or 5 episodes to resolve, and it's funny because of that. And whereas when we start
or in spite of that.
Oh, in spite of that as well. But when we get into the last couple seasons that were Netflix produced, the way it was developed, it's definitely forced. And it goes back to his comment about drip feeding. They're trying to drip feed this comedy in there, trying to get the laugh rather than just letting it kind of flow. and you end up trying too hard.
Which is how you ruin perfectly good comedy. Michael?
I think rhythm is an important component to it, and this could be a good way to segue into the comic portion of the show. But in a comic strip, you can achieve a lot of rhythm by cutting all the dialogue and just having. You could even have the same panel as before, just without the dialogue, and just having characters stare at each other before the punchline hits. And so those quiet moments, and then in books having the pacing of sentences sort of build up, and then having like a pace breaker line. It's something to think about. And in the visual medium of comics, those those just blank expressions. That's a good way to create.
In comedy, that's called timing.
Yeah.
It's all about the timing.
That's right.
So
And sometimes it's the twist at the end too.
Oh,
The twist.
absolutely. It's so let's move into our second hour. Let's reintroduce ourselves and do the little pimp of the show. Kevin, why don't you start introducing yourself first?
Good evening, I am Kevin Crew. I am a former blogger. I'm Travis's co-host on Monday night's show, and alongside Travis, I co-wrote Drowning Kittens for Fun and Profit.
There we go. Aaron?
It's a great title.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Aaron Kennedy, author of Persona Non Grata, the first book in the Ships of Valor series. Currently working on the Icarus Black series, set in the same universe. Been a technical writer for 25 years. Ta-da!
Very good. John?
I'm John from Jersey's Cards and Comics. That's our host store that Conquest Comics works out of, or Conquest Publishing. You can see what we're doing at conquestuniverse.com. We have started up Instagram and a couple other things that are linked on the website. We are a mentoring program that are where we want to help you get your start in the industry. Take a look.
Very good. And Michael, I know you're busy. I'm kind of trying to
I'm channeling my inner Aaron. So, let's see. My name is Michael Thompson. I am an independent author and illustrator. Write all sorts of books. One of them, my latest one, is Chicken Boy and the Might of the Monkey Man. Action, comedy, adventure for middle grade readers and up. And I did all the fun illustrations. Check it out. Really cool stuff. MichaelThompsonBooks.com.
Very good. Okay. And hold on, what did I just click on? Oh, for Danny. Thank you there, Word to Win. I am I am Travis Sivart. I'm the host, and since I mentioned one of my other Joe Wilson books, which is the pen name I use for my children's books or my younger audience, Birdie, how are you? It's hold on, I'm trying to get the glare off him. My Bunny is a Zombie and My Puppy is a Werewolf are two of the children's books that I have published. I do have a third one coming out as soon as I nail an artist to a table and force them with blood to draw out the pictures that I need done. So working on that. Okay, yeah, the show. If you guys are watching here as live on twitch.tv/Travis Tavern Talk, you can also find us on various podcast services in case you missed the show, or on YouTube, or on right here on Twitch, where they're all put up as a full highlight for the full show, so they remain there forever. I think that's it. Oh, yeah, if you're listening one of those ways, feel free to join us live Saturday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern at the aforementioned twitch.tv/Travis Tavern Talk, where right night is 2 hours. First hour, creative hour. Second hour, technical hour. And we're entering our technical hour with the topic of funny book business. So John, having his fingers and feet in the comic book industry for years, that'd be a good word. Maybe I can make that into a kid's book, right? Oh, let me also do this for the kids' books. I think Michael already got it, didn't you?
I got you.
Thank you, man. Good job.
Lightning fingers.
You are. And speaking of lightning, I am in the midst of a storm, so if suddenly we lose power and lose contact, yes, so be it. But we're going to push on as far as we can, see if we can make it through this storm without losing any of that stuff. So, John, why don't
That's
we...
what she said.
Yeah, that's right. She did. I told her, don't talk with your mouth full. Moving on to John. John, why don't you give us a little bit of your credentials and history and really preen and fluff yourself up and impress us with that background?
I have been very fortunate to, well, believe it or not, the military moving me around allowed me to meet a lot of professionals in the industry. I've done a couple inking jobs with Marvel and DC. I interfaced a little bit with Disney when I was teaching down at Nuclear Power School in Florida for their computer animation back in the day. And then I also got to meet Merritt Island Press, and we had AC Comics, and a lot of professionals actually retired in the Orlando area. And actually, some of the things that I promised I'm going to show you came from the Cartoon Museum, which I was a partner in for a short period of time. So, but what was cool was most of the retired professionals would be there. If you like cigars, that would be Orlando at the time. And so
No.
we were talking about, oh, go ahead.
No, I think you're about to go into it. After this, make sure you go into Conquest Publishing and what you're working on now and let us know a little bit of that. And then we'll totally interrupt you, derail you, and start bombarding you with questions to help Michael and everybody out.
So here is a sample
Down?
of a comedy piece from,
Nice.
but the funny part is to read what it says at the bottom.
I love you. I want the whole world to know except my wife.
Nice.
Now, humor wasn't always, so that was like the Humorama in the 60s probably.
Makes sense. The art style, too.
This is more political satire.
Yep, that's the way we Texans used to do it. Coming up next, a live execution. Now that feels more recent, that's for sure.
Well, that's actually pretty old.
80s?
These are the samples of people wanted to know what a strip looked like.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
This
Wow.
This is from Terry and the Pirates.
Now what is that?
So just get
30
an idea.
inches?
Do what?
Now what is that? 30 inches? I'm sure you've heard that question before.
This is so it's they're typically 4 inches wide
Uh-huh.
and 18 inches long.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but that's Terry and the Pirates, and then this was more of a. But these were your Sunday typical strips and stuff. This is how they were sent off to the printer. To get done.
So these artists aren't drawing it in these little 1.5 by 1.5 inch boxes. They've got something almost 4 times that size and 3 to 4 of them. Mhm.
Everything just like these. This is the size we actually do a comic book page.
And what size is
And I
that?
told you, this is these are 11 by 17.
Okay.
So this was when I told you that we were putting Deadpool in some of our promotions. You can probably
There he is.
so Guardians. This is the one we did for the Guardians promotion. This was the Wonder Woman one.
Cool.
It's hard to see him because he's back by the tree.
There he is. There he is. I see him.
It's having a bit of popcorn, watching Wolverine and a woman from Ghost in the Shell go at it because we were doing a double.
Interesting.
And
Who
this
won?
one- this is typically, obviously, because we all know that Deadpool is a spin-off of Deathstroke.
Right.
On the back of the Spider-Man movies, Deathstroke sucks on the panel behind them as they're doing their self and stuff.
Where do you do the Deathstroke? In a Deadpool.
Perhaps. The last bit of artwork that you saw was from various people in Conquest Comics. As Travis said, we have about 25 projects that we're working on currently. The first one we're going to release is Whitebird from Mercedes Lackey. It's about a ferry pilot during World War II. I've shown a couple of samples of the artwork. There's a lot of it up on the
Instagram.
Conquest Universe site.
As well as Instagram and other social media.
and she's we've got 5 short stories from her. We have Emissary Wars. That was the character that I showed you for this. This is our superhero universe title that the UN basically turns over control of the world to superheroes.
And it ties into the role-playing game you're creating, is that correct?
It ties into one section of the role-playing game, correct. Think of a more of a Shadowrun type of corporate. So the super teams kind of vie for power and stuff, and some of the super teams are actually like science organizations and corporations and those type of things. They
Gotcha.
sponsor those particular superheroes.
Now, can I? I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish.
No. And basically, with that, 3 organizations have control for 6 months in 4 geopolitical regions of Earth. That way, nobody has particular dominance. Although part of the story is that they show how they can get that.
Manipulating. Now, let me ask you this: can you briefly, reasonably briefly at least, break down the life of a comic from the inception, and whether that starts with an artist or a writer, all the way to publication? And we'll keep interrupting you with questions as you go, so bear with us on that.
So let's go with something that most people will know about, and that's The Wizard of Oz.
Okay.
Because we're doing an alternate version of that. One of our young creators asked what happened with the Silver Slippers. So I said, well, let's write a story. Let's sit down and work out what happened with the Silver Slippers. So the basic, how it evolved was that one of the carnival magicians overheard Dorothy talking about going to Oz. Well, off to the farm he goes, and he steals the Silver Slippers and disappears. We flash into the future.
If I may, real quick. In the original story, guys, they weren't ruby slippers. So that's to clarify a thing there. The movie Ruby was prettier in the Technicolor.
Right. Okay.
And that's why we can't use them. It's in public domain, but we cannot use the Ruby story.
Okay. Which works out fine. Go on.
We move forward. The gentleman who stole the Silver Slippers became one of the in the 60s. They had a lot of savants and stuff that would read minds, and they had television shows and stuff like that, and he became a millionaire. Well, we flash, all the characters are the descendants of the original characters. So the Cowardly Lion, his grandson is this big hulking 6-foot-tall lion man. But the premise of the story is that Mr. Winslow, who is the carnival magician that stole this and became famous and wealthy, attempted to open up a portal so he could go to Oz. They had this great big huge mirror that they tried to open up the portal with, and nothing happened. Well, we know that men can't use Oz magic. So he got in with his occult buddies, because he did kind of dabble in the occult, and they forced the spell. And basically what happened was the mirror reflected Oz and created Zaz, which is a dystopian steampunk Oz creation. They actually brought it into being with that spell. And it sucks magic out of Oz to keep Zaz into being. And there's a lot of backstory. The Gale Wind and Solar Energy Company, because that's Dorothy's last name, Gale, her son, has been offsetting power to Oz this whole time. And him and his wife gets divorced, and she goes out to be with Mr. Winslow because she's kind of a gold digger.
What is the process from this concept from start to finish? So not so much the concept. I think most of us have an idea in our head. We can go, I'd love to do a comic of this. But what's the process? I have this idea. What now?
So after that, we kind of started writing out the script. Those are then given to artists, well, actually the whole team, so we can come up with character pages, similar to what Aaron's having Michael do. Go ahead, Aaron.
When you say script, okay, we all kind of envision, I assume, a movie script. But what's a comic kind of look like? I assume it's panel based, and then freaking a little bit of dialogue, or
It is a movie script without the particular direction for camera angles and stuff. Although,
okay,
so a comic book script will have dialogue between characters, and then the artist directions at the bottom. So I need a worm's eye view going from, looking up the skyscraper, and you see like Spider-Man swinging across, but they set up the tone and stuff for that particular thing.
So,
But even before we start doing that, we need character approved how the characters are going to look, so we keep continuity between the book.
so with those directions, and it sounds like it's not necessarily every panel. Sometimes the artist is given kind of a free rein. Other times there's something specific you need in there, or something very specific where you give details. Who gives those details? Is it the writer? Is it the editor?
So the writer gives the details of how they're writing the particular the story. So you as a writer, you're writing out the visuals as part of your longer. You're describing that in your story.
So it's almost a novelization for the
Right.
script.
In a script format, you're just taking out the direction or the visuals, and you're putting that into specific instructions on how to do that.
Aaron has a question.
term that I've seen often is plotter, writer/plotter. Chris Claremont was known as that, or Byrne was known as plotter as well. Is
John
that
Byrne.
where we're getting to? Okay, hey, the artist directions and stuff.
Well, but that has to be part of your story anyway. I don't differentiate between the two, with the exception of, like, I am the plotter for Mercedes Lackey's short stories because it's already a written story, and I'm converting it into a script.
Okay.
So I am taking the visual clues and saying, all right, I need Messerschmitt behind the Spitfire, and I need bullets to be ripping through the front cowl of the plane, because that's described in the story. But I have to give that to the penciler as his visual clues. Now, I guess it's easier to break down who on the team does what. So the editor, he has total control over to ensure that it's a professional product at the end.
Okay.
He's going to look over the script. He's going to go back to the writer and say, all right, I don't get where you're going from here to here. I need you to, be more descriptive on what this is. His script is going to the penciler. If I can't look at his panel and tell what's going on without word bubbles and stuff in it, it needs to go back to him and, explain to him, hey, I need you to, my eye doesn't focus on this particular character, and it should be in that particular panel. You either need to pull in closer to that particular area that you're drawing. And Michael kind of talked about that when he was doing his with the map. He kind of put a pinhole in there over the scene. I need you to focus your eye to this particular part. After the editor approves those pencils, then it goes off to an inker. And inker's job is not just to darken in lines and stuff. He is there to enhance the book. He's
Tracer, man, Tracer.
That'll get you.
No. Chasing
but
Amy makes that joke.
His main job, though, is consistency, because the penciler is sometimes rushed. He has to ensure that all the little bits and pieces are consistent throughout the book. That all of a sudden the guy's not changing sizes, the planes that got different markings and stuff on it. And I had an issue with that actually with Whitebird, is because he drew the plane as being pristine after they'd just gotten shot up by the Messerschmitt. And it's like, we need the bullet holes back in this. It has to look like it's battle damage.
So they act like a continuity editor in that case.
Well, yeah, you always have to go through and make sure that the continuity stays with that. And then the last person that's going to get it is the colorist. Well, actually, that's not correct. The colorist gets it next. He will set the tone for the particular book, and I think we kind of went on this a couple other times, but go ahead, Travis.
Real quick, when you're talking about the colorist and we were talking about continuity and whatnot, previously in other episodes we've talked about color palettes. So who decides that color palette writer, editor, colorist,
Um,
or group
so
decision?
And typically you're going to have a meeting with all the creators in it anyway. But so we're a different beast than Marvel. But the editor usually would set the tone for the color palette. He would tell the colorist that this is a World War II book. I need earth tones. I need this particular palette. It has to match the thing. Or this is Sergeant Rock. I need that. I don't need superhero bright colors. It's not a 4-color comic.
Right.
The movie Dick Tracy back in the 90s, they used the standard 4 colors in there to recreate the feel of the comic, which just kind of a side note on that. Whereas Deadpool has actually done a pretty good job of, the movie did a pretty good job of translating it from a real world back into that comic feel.
And that's usually a conscious decision too. I mean, you go through it, and we're trying a new technique to where we're using different color palettes to actually draw the eye into a particular area.
Okay, so like the black and white movie that does the one red rose or whatever, but with a full palette and one specific
We're
brighter.
doing it with a full palette. I haven't really seen it in the comic book industry, so it's something that we're trying out. It's been working pretty well. It does actually pull the eye and the focus into.
The Sin City series did a good job of that.
Yeah.
It's hard not to. I mean, it's
all black and white with one
right.
muted
we're
color.
using a whole palette.
Oh,
Right.
no, I got you. But it's to kind of highlight
Okay.
what's going on.
And John, are you okay with our pacing here, with us constantly interrupting you with these questions and bombarding you?
Oh, because that's going to be best because.
Good.
I'm just going to keep rambling on about.
Just making sure we're not breaking your flow and getting annoying, because now we're like kids in a candy store. And Michael,
Where were you on the day of the 5th?
what I'd like to do, Michael,
Believe it or not,
what I'd like to do, John and Michael, is after you get done with here's the basic machine works, I kind of want to put Michael right there into the spotlight and let him bombard you, because I'm guessing, I don't know this for sure, he might have a project in mind. Am I anywhere close to true on that?
I
Eben.
have been thinking of it.
Real quick, if I may, Eben, good to see you. Thank you for that, host. Appreciate that. Here's to you, man. Good to see you. We're talking about the life and process of making a comic book, and I want Kevin to make sure you jump in. I know it's 2 a.m., 2:22 there in the UK where you've joined us.
Yeah, at 2:25
So-
a.m. Yeah.
I just want to engage you so you don't doze off. So-
I'm fine. This is why all of my blog writing was so angry and sarcastic, because you keep me up until 3 o'clock in the morning every night.
You think it'd be slow and dopey. But anyhow. Okay. Go on, John.
So, probably the last two things, and sometimes very overlooked, is similar to the tone of a palette. The letterer sets the tone sometimes through
Interesting.
enhancements and stuff of the script.
We talked
And
about...
that is their.
I'm sorry, John. Aaron?
Oh, no. You kind of led into this. I grabbed a couple covers just to kind of highlight the color palette and stuff like that. But he just mentioned the letterer doing something, and this is a. Let's see if I got a good one here.
Lean it. And then angle it back. There we go. Yeah. So in a different episode, we discussed fonts and how that can totally change the feel and the mood of things. But John, you just said the letterer helps set the mood. Does he have the power to change the script at certain points?
No. He can anybody can make suggestions along the way.
Okay.
But his job is to read over that particular panel and see where the emphasis needs to be in that bubble, script, whatever portion that he has there, and do the highlights and stuff in that particular.
So if he puts a
way.
bold or wants a second ring around the word bubble, or a colored letter for emotion.
Right. Mm-hmm. It could be, that you particularly want to know about, or the focus needs to be on a character.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when the name of that character comes up, it's going to be bolded out, versus just the same kind of text throughout.
Or
the
I
whole
love
thing.
it when they'll put, like And then Wolverine said this thing, and in that word bubble, Wolverine's in his cover font. With the automatically recognize it. You don't even have to read the word. You know what it is right off. Okay.
Now, that sometimes is two separate artists. Now, a titler,
Uh-huh.
or that guy that comes up with the X-Men logo that's on the front.
Right.
That's usually not your letter. It can be your letter, but usually that's another graphic artist that comes up with. If you do go to our Instagram, you'll see like Emissary Wars and some of our other, those are particular logos that are always going to be on the front of the book that set, so it's identifiable always when you do that. And
Branding it.
with X-Men for branding is that that that's what that is.
Yeah, there we go. Automatically recognizable. Now, John, you said letterer step before the last? One more step after letterer?
Usually what's happening in the whole background of all this is that there might be a separate artist that is known for doing just cover work.
Right.
I mean, and
Arthur Adams.
Right. Well, and he does it.
He does.
Too. Well, Greg Land is probably the most known somewhat for a lot of cover work, but the cover is really your selling point. That is your hook to get somebody to buy that damn book.
John,
if the cover looks horrible, nobody buys.
For my cover, I want to hand it to a whole crew of people like this. That's freaking incredible, everything that goes into one book in this case. And by the way, when you're done with this, if you could do it in 5 minutes, I want to go through the publishing process. Once the book is created, what's the rest of the story? Because it's not on a shelf yet. It's just created.
Oh, no. So usually you want 3 books in the bag before you actually start sending things off. That way when life happens, pandemics happen, other things happen, you have work that's already ready to go.
Especially with a smaller company. That could be the death knell of a small company.
Oh, shoot. So important.
Yeah.
So you've got the books finished. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to do an ashcan version, and you're going to do a write-up for your distributor.
What's an ashcan version?
So it's a small, think that you took a regular sheet of paper and you printed out the comic and you folded it in half, basically. So
okay.
It's 4 by
6?
5 or whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, 4 by 6.
What's that term
Send
again?
that off to them.
Ashcan.
That's
A-S-H can. Sorry, spelling for Michael.
Okay.
Go ahead, John.
It used to be a fun thing that creators could take to cons and sign and give out. It's not done as much now in the digital age because you can just send them the files and stuff for it.
Yeah,
but
they get a
PDF. You
PDF.
also have to write up your pitch, your elevator pitch on, hey, this is who the creator is, what the creative team is, the cost of the book, and then the pitch of what it is in that little Twitter space that they're going to give you in their big catalog that comes out once a month.
Yeah. 500 characters.
Quick question for you, John. Do those little ashcan books include blank pages for your ads and stuff? And I don't even remember if they got ads anymore, but back in the day it was like 30 pages, and then 8 of those pages were advertisements of various types.
Well, we'd leave, for ashcans, we would leave blank pages so people that worked on the book could sign them at conventions.
That's cool.
So leave spots and stuff there, or a quick sketch or any. Go ahead.
John, you need to make ashcan copies for the conventions. I don't care if it's 20 and that's it, but yeah, dude, you got to do that. Roll it back old school and give them that. Give the fans that.
For our first project, we still even have ashcans still because I refuse to just let them go to waste.
You let them, if they'll sign them, I want a copy of every damn one of them.
But and I think that that's something that should be brought back because it is something that you have with you that's portable that you can hand to somebody. This is our project and this is what it looks like. And you're not handing them a color version of it. You're just doing the black and whites and the text and stuff.
So it's been completed except for coloring. It's been inked, it's been drawn, it's been lettered.
Just for the ashcan, yes. It doesn't have to be the final project. It's in the past what it was used for is for Diamond and other distributors to make sure that you actually had a product, that you weren't. Go ahead, Travis.
If you do ash cans, I really recommend on that first blank page, you put this is an ash can copy and then define that shit because people won't know what the hell you're handing them anymore. They'll be like, it's all in black and white. I want a color comic book. This has not been colored yet. That has been done, just not in this sample.
It is usually actually in the indica, in the information on there.
Nobody reads that shit.
So,
Nobody's gonna read the little what an ash can is either.
Well, if you make it in,
Be surprised.
18 font.
Yeah, no,
Gotta give him a chance.
if it is a popular title that became super popular, Ashcan editions go for crazy money
I remember that.
because they weren't out there. Even Wizards magazine did Ashcan editions just as a kind of a mini trailer for that was what was considered trailers for comic books back then. Yeah. But the key thing with your distributor was that they wanted to make sure that you actually are doing a project and you're not just sending them. Remember we talked about, hey, I got this idea and I've got a couple pages that's drawn out.
Right.
I'm not done with it yet. Well, they're going to ensure that you're done with the project, not sending them, hopes and dreams and stuff.
Yep.
So,
And that makes sense for anybody. And we beat this like a dead horse. If you're going to say, I have a book, I have a script, I have a comic, you need to have most of a project. It doesn't have to be the whole project, but you've got to have more than an idea. You've got to have something.
And you'll see that even now in the previews. Like Marvel will say, this is not the final cover art.
Right.
Now, what really piss off a retailer is just to show me a blank thing and,
With the title.
enough said. Well, not even that sometimes. They give you that whole Stanley enough said. It's like, I'm not buying this because I don't know what the hell it is.
Right.
Trust us.
It's got the word X-Men or Spider-Man on it. People are going to buy it. Whatever.
Oh, yeah. So,
Yeah.
um,
Okay. Publishing.
So after your submissions, your hash hand goes in. They'll do the typeset. They'll get it into their previews. Usually, while that's happening, you're waiting for them to find out how many orders or what your print demand is going to be.
So when you say they, you specifically mean Diamond or somebody else, and they're going to print it and publish it?
Currently, Diamond,
Uh-huh.
and now things are changing drastically. I don't know if we want to go over this now.
You can mention it
The
now.
new news is what?
Go ahead and go over it now.
All right, so Diamond just lost DC the rights to distribute for DC Comics.
Why?
DC Comics, well, during the pandemic, there was issues of things not being shipped out.
Ah.
I don't know why they thought that was not going to happen. Like people were just going to go to the warehouse and pack up their books and stuff. But they've gone to Midtown and a couple other smaller distributors. Now, Marvel tried this at one time and failed utterly with it.
What year?
And that's what kind of started these exclusive contracts.
What year did Marvel try that?
That was...
Or what decade? 90s?
I actually wrote down the date here, so...
Okay.
I think it was 1997.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's when Marvel was going through its death throes before it was able to recover.
Oh, they declared bankruptcy. So Diamond signed an exclusive with DC, and it just didn't work out.
See,
the basic.
It's a different world now,
new
though,
thing is-
with digital and everything now. Not like it was in 97, so it could go either way, and I can't even guess what direction it would go.
And the evolution of things now is, it's the doomsaying right now with this happening is now comics are dead. Well, this has happened since the 50s.
Right.
So, World War II, comic sales went down. Comics are going to die. Didn't happen. Seduction of the innocent in the Senate. Oh my God, they're going to control everything. Now we got the comics code. Comics are dead. That was in '54, I think. Didn't happen. Uh, the '70s comic sales kind of were starting to take a little bit of a dive.
Right.
We left
By the way,
DC's.
my first comic I ever got was a Spider-Man comic. John, do you remember like the Brothers and Sisters of the Sun where he was fighting a cult? I don't know if that rings a bell.
Oh, I know the one that you're referencing.
Odd that you would. I'm thrilled that you would. But yeah, that's the first Spider-Man comic I ever got. I must have been 5 or 6, and yeah, I remember that. And I've seen it one other time, not the same book probably, but I saw it again, and I'm like, that was my first comic.
Well, but historically, we've gone through all these times, these dooms and glooms that comics are going to die, and this is just a new thing. I mean, in 2016, people were worried that people were politically influencing how Marvel and DC were going to put out their product and handle certain particular characters. Didn't kill anything. I think every single time distribution and comics have adapted and changed. But as you said, yes, now with the new digital thing, and that was one of the times that people said, "Oh, comics are gone because direct to print." But I mean, sequential art has been around since Stone Age.
Yeah,
So
I was about to say Egyptian time or before. Yeah.
it's not going away. It's just going to evolve into different subjects. I mean, and a lot of people are on the web right now talking about this. I think with Diamond, the way that they need to evolve is, as you alluded to, is that they should offer printing services just like Amazon does for small publishers and comic book creators. And then for their digital line with Barnes and Noble and those types of things, they need to evolve as a company to stay competitive. Now, us as a retail chain, in Jersey's, we do own multiple stores. We're worried that do we have to order more with Diamond? We have to up our order on other books to maintain our discount structure. And when we're ordering just with DC now separately, are they going to offer us the same discount that we had previously? Or are they all going to, since they're all in separate houses, more control? And we have to sit back as a company and say, is it really worth it to sell new comics anymore with all the work that's going to be associated with tracking all these separate places? Now, there was a Plan C thing, Plan Comics, but COVID also, that was on Facebook that I joined, and all the independents wanted to offer each store their title at a certain discount. And I had to be honest with them and said, there's no store that's going to do that. I'm not going to track 500 different independent comic books, and and send out checks or payments and stuff, and then also keep track that you didn't send me something. It's just not going to happen. It's just too much work. With all the faults of Diamond, they have a nice catalog and all of it's in there. And I know that, they're responsible. They're the person that I can call and say, my shit's broken, fix it. Go ahead, Aaron.
What John's talking, and I just want to interject here. What John's talking about is administrative burden. I harp on this is a business. You are a business owner, and one of the big things that you're going to run into is what can I do to reduce my administrative burden to make it easier to support my customers and in turn get money. You jump my administrative burden up, my profit margin has to jump up to cover that time. This goes back to the John mentioned earlier, Image Comics in the '90s when they splintered off. It was a great kind of thing, but their publisher or the people that were actually printing their books was Marvel, which made those harder and harder to get and longer lead times, and just all these burdens kind of stack up.
Well, Image was an imprint studio, so they would take on other people's projects and stuff. I think in the business world, what you want to look at is, why are the Walmarts in the big box stores becoming relevant? Mom and pop shops, we have to spit down to more specific type of markets and stuff. And the comic book industry, unfortunately, might have to start going into that particular business model. Back to we offer printing services, kind of the all-in-one kind of thing. We'll help you out, and then me as a retailer, how is this going to affect me? And are you going to establish a chain where it's easier for me to get things? So we don't know yet is the key thing. All we got was a big long, explanation on, oh, you're only going to be getting these DC titles, and then next week you're only going to get these ones. Go ahead, Travis.
Okay, let's move into Michael now. Michael, do you have a list of questions?
I'm enjoying absorbing all of this, but I am interested in like the type of paper that you need. It's kind of a boring question, but like the type of glossy paper that or the different sort of like
quality,
the weight of the paper.
Sure, yeah.
So us as Conquest, we go to the printer and we say, all right, I need to know what the cost breakdown are going to be on these particular types of paper, quality. Now, there's a comic book company called Alterna that they went back to the cheaper newsprint type of printing. But believe it or not, on a mass scale, the price difference isn't that much. So if you want, when we talk about color palettes and stuff again, if you want maybe that retro feel to your comic book, you might want to go to newsprint and kind of go back to that kind of feel.
Yeah.
There is a company that's out and they're just doing black and white. They have a couple big industry standard guys that are working with them. Travis?
But that cheaper newsprint type feel, it bleeds more, doesn't it?
Not now. Printing processes have gotten a lot better per se. In the past for coloring, so back in the 80s and the 90s when I was involved in more in that, we didn't have a colorist that colored. You had a person that assigned, they did what's called a silver. They took the artwork and they assigned color structures to particular areas, and that went to the printer. And then he knew that he had to mix, like if it was one color at this percentage and another color, that was a color that he was printing into that area on the book. So it was a different thing altogether. Nowadays, it's digital, so you don't have to go through that. You have a colorist, that's their job, is to actually add.
They were more like screen printing, like on T-shirts and stuff.
Similar, yes.
Do ISBNs play a role when you're publishing a comic book, or is there something unique?
So you have an indica that tells you that volume 1 on this date, and then it has all the things that are on the bottom, where it's printed, the name of the company, and what printing it is. So for collectability, obviously a first printing always has, more people wanting it. Now, the comic book industry as a whole, we're moving away from collectors and more into readers. The Netflix phenomenon of I want to binge watch things. That's why trade paperbacks and graphic novels sales have constantly been going up versus. Go ahead, Travis.
I didn't want to interrupt, but yes, a couple of comments, by the way, relating to paper. Evan Blade of Revan says, I love the feel of the pump paper in my fingers. It's an aesthetic thing. Glossy stuff just makes me feel like I'm going to smudge it. And Wordowin says, I like rough paper which grabs my fingers and demands to be read. Michael, I read these comments specifically because if you're looking at doing something like this psychological thing, especially for an older generation, above 25-ish, I guess, it does have a throwback effect in our heads of this is what I think of as a comic. And I see Kevin nodding there. So any comment, Kevin, before I pass it to Aaron?
No, I think you're perfectly right there. There's a certain aesthetic to the feel of something like a comic book in your hands. You're quite right. With glossier paper, it almost gives the impression that that's something that's come churning off of a mill from a vast production, and a rougher paper kind of implies a more mom and pop homespun, John.
No,
Well,
and that's the thing in the industry.
Pass it to Aaron when you're done, John.
magazine paper is that's what we're talking about, the glossy paper that was used for magazines. And it's actually harder now to find a printer that does like newsprint and stuff that will do comics because most of the industry moved into the glossy paper and that type of stuff. Now, because the advantage with the glossy paper is you do get a crisper image than the other ones. But as I talked to, just like color palettes, if that matches kind of the feel that you want for the book, you want it to be a retro book. And here's a prime example. Let's see if we can.
Oh, very cool.
But it's kind of got the old movie marquee in it.
I like it.
Their paper. They used a heavier weight paper, but it has a texture to it.
Nice.
And you can work that out with your printer. They'll tell you what your cost is going to be to do that, Travis.
See, for me, the magazine glossy pages almost feels like you don't want to touch it. And also, it doesn't have. There's the aesthetic of I can grip it, I can turn it, even though it's more delicate. But that glossy, it's like touching something more expensive, which it was at one point. Aaron, you had a comment or a question?
A comment, actually. We talked about the paperweight and stuff like that. When you pick up a paper book or a paperback book, a lot of times it's got a very similar weight and feel to the old classic comics. Whereas if you pick up the hardback books, you're getting into more that feel of the perfect bounds and our freaking collected editions. I grabbed a couple from my collection behind me. The Wolverine Saga was kind of a documentary type thing, but it had that. It's not glossy paper, but it's that heavier weight, nice thick paper.
Kind of a middle ground.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas that glossy paper, a comic I read, this was back during the weird stage of Claremont and the X-Men, was Havoc and Wolverine's Meltdown. It was glossy, but the art reflected it had very much a marker type feel. Thick, broad strokes, which wouldn't have felt right on that kind of paper. Go ahead, John.
And in the comic book industry, and the reader base is aging out. So we lost a lot of people in 87 to 94 because of all the gimmicks and stuff. So the newer readers, I mean, the glossy paper doesn't bother them as much. And with the trades, you do it that way. And believe it or not, it's because it is currently cheaper to print on magazine stock than it is to go back and try to find where you would think that old crappy newsprint would be cheap. It's just logistically, it's not.
Quick question for you on that, John. Advertisements, what's the current? Because I haven't bought new comics and for who knows how long. I buy the trade paperbacks or I go to Marvel Unlimited and read them there. I imagine it was much like the newspapers of back in the heyday, to where, yes, your reader is kind of supporting things and you make a little bit of profit, but your advertisers were kind of offset the cost to get you to be able to flush.
So I'll put it in. It's like double dipping for the larger companies, Marvel and DC. Ad revenue, just the cover price on the comic easily brings them profit.
Okay.
They have a higher payout because of the professionals that they have to pay, the creators and the other people, because they have no names and stuff. And their royalty base is a little higher, and we can go into royalties and stuff later, agreements. But even once we get a foothold into stuff, we will seek out advertisers in the book to offset, to get more profit into things. A lot of independents started off with local mom and pop shops that were close to where they were doing their projects. Go ahead, Travis.
I don't want to cut you off, so finish your thought, but then please hand it back to Michael. What I really want to focus on is getting Michael the information he needs to do the next project he wants. It's supporting the small artist and creator here. So ignore Aaron. Don't ignore Aaron, but ignore Aaron and go to Mike.
Until you get your foothold, what you're doing with the advertising space that you planned out, you're putting in editorials or upcoming projects and those types of things. Now, we are seeking out advertisers. So if one comes on, we just move that upcoming project page off because that's revenue that's on there. But if that doesn't work out, we leave it on there.
What's
So,
the cost so I can advertise my next book? We could talk afterwards.
Your last books too.
Oh, previous
No,
books,
but
not
it
my
sounds
last
like
book.
you keep. No, it sounds like you're using in-house P&A, prints and advertisements, to offset the cost, and fun Hollywood accounting to where, oh, we've got this project, we charge it against the back end, and then we get it back when we can actually do that, or that's a means of doing
the
it.
part I talked about double dipping is that, I mean, you print your book based off of not ad revenue currently in it,
Okay.
and you're profitable. So if I have a $3.99 comic book, our cost right now with the printer that we're looking at is 72 cents. So Diamond wants to give you 40% of that total cost, and then they go to me as a retailer and offer me 50 to 55% off of cover to carry it in the store. That's the common current distribution chain. Like I said, things might have to evolve currently. We don't know where that's going to be, but we're profitable just based off of that.
So we've got 10 minutes. Michael, what
Go ahead,
else
Michael.
you got on your list?
Well, this is all very interesting to me because, when I was young, a lot like you, Travis, I would draw comic books in my notebooks, in my journals,
But you had
and just
talent,
on
unlike me.
sheets of paper, and it would be things kind of in the style of my Chicken Boy books, but it would be a true comic book. Now, Chicken Boy kind of has that comic book feel, but it's a chapter book, and there's no color. But I guess
Yes.
something I'm kind of interested in is graphic novels, which has the panels and stuff, but would be bound in the likeness of a novel and probably have more glossy pages. Yeah. So, and in the event that like I would do like the whole, the inking and all the color and all myself, is there some type of like special template, or dimensions that are different, cut lines, bleed?
Yeah. Good.
If I could interject real quick and then pass it to the professional who actually knows what he's talking about. Michael, I believe there is actually something like this available on Amazon self-publishing. But I'll talk about later. Hiccups, good times. Okay, John, now the guy who knows what he's talking about here.
So the key thing is that you want to determine what the end goal is for your graphic novel. So costs and the dimensions of the book are kind of important. Treasury editions, which you see a lot in comic books, those used to be those great, big, huge, horrible things.
I had the Star Wars one.
Yeah, well, the problem is it doesn't fit into a comic book box. It doesn't fit on the shelf. It doesn't have there's no bags and boards to put them in. They're cool because the artwork is to actual size, but it's horrible overall. So you have to kind of determine, who your target audience later on is going to be. If you notice, even with the as you explained with the Calvin and Hobbes, they didn't have the typical comic book dimensions. They had the strip layer type thing, and then a long, wider kind of look to it. Your printer's going to charge you, believe it or not, based on, they have a couple of templates that they're going to use, just as Travis said, on Amazon Prime, that they'll tell you these are the templates and stuff that we have for printing. And you're going to have to, and I think I have software for that, so I'll probably just send you that shows you a couple different formats, because you got to make sure that your artwork works into it. Typically, comic books, we know what our 32 pages, what we got to work with. We plan out a double page split, double page splash in the middle of it, so you have a nice big, kind of show off our artistic abilities and stuff. So
very cool. Thank you for illustrating. It's a whole new medium that I had never considered
and
telling stories within. And
every day I learn. So
yeah, so I appreciate your wealth of knowledge, and I'm very grateful.
And we have 5 minutes left, so it's time for some wrap-up thoughts or any points that you guys feel are important that we've missed. Poor Kevin is turning into a zombie and about to eat his own cat to stay awake. So, any final points here that need touched on that are important or unimportant but interesting?
Well, so me as a publicist and an artist and getting back involved in this, the comic book industry is. I've talked to some of the other book publishers and stuff, and they, well, my book hasn't sold this many. When I tell them that, we've already got $5,000 in profit for orders with not even the book out yet, is because we have people that have committed to a particular thing. It's easier in the comic book industry to do mass numbers and stuff. The distribution chain's a little bit easier. It goes to targeted stores and stuff for that. And the key thing is, if you're going to do a comic and you're independent, is to get to those stores and send them stuff, send them free samples, let them know how you're going to help their store to get better at what they're doing. But we have to evolve right now. We don't know what the landscape's going to be. So as a publicist, you have to take that into account too. It's just the nature of the beast.
Aaron?
Quick one on that. So I know we got to drip feed the content and actually put out a few issues. Is there kind of a break-even point for profitability on them?
Issue 1.
Issue 1?
Yes.
Oh, rough. Okay. And that's for the artist and the writer and everything and the creators behind the scenes as well?
Oh, because we didn't have time to go into royalties and payment dispersion. There's different ways that companies do it. So Marvel pays a page rate, and they also pay a royalty, perpetuity. If they reprint your book, let's say you do an X-Men series into a trade paperback or a graphic novel,
okay,
you get royalties for the republication of that book. So
okay,
in our particular instance, you own the rights to that property. We have a contract that you are the owner and it's yours. So, but companies do a lot of different things. As I said, Image is an imprint studio. We're a cross between Marvel and Image in that Image doesn't have a congruent universe. We're an imprint studio that has a universe that people can write within. We specifically made Emissary Wars so we could pants and have other writers come in and write stories for Emissary Wars if they want to write stuff for it. So,
okay.
If I may,
it's different.
Eben says that. Sorry. Eben says, "Wow, that is really generous," and it is. I imagine that's an extensive contract to cover everybody on that. Something I will say is, any writers out there who's hitting a point where they're considering branching out into other mediums, such as I've known writers go into manga and have their stuff published that way also. Gail Carriger in particular comes to mind for me. This is something down the road I would definitely consider as another project, taking whether it's my short story cycles and creating a graphic novel for each story, or even my whole books and running it off as a separate story. I think that would be great. This is definitely a consideration, I think, for writers as another medium, because whatever I write, to have somebody draw that imagery with that combination of what I put down and what they envision, I think that would just be incredible and something kind of on the bucket list of the writer. So, closing thoughts in the last 2 minutes here, guys? John?
Even artists love to do that. Hey, I'll draw your character, you draw mine. And it's just a cool thing to see how their take on your particular character is, and writing obviously then too. So.
Well, I did a cameo of one of Michael's trademark artifacts in one of my books, and he was flattered, which I was glad, because there's always a chance he'd be like, "Yeah, no, don't do that," and I'd be like, "Cool, I will pull that out. Nope, no big deal."
I think it's awesome.
I also want to say just briefly, and it's not serious at all, but I think you were harsh on yourself a moment ago, Travis, when you said that that Michael had talent and you had none. Remind you that the book we wrote together has 100 entries for which you drew 100 illustrations, and you may have drawn them with a Sharpie, but when you ask a man to draw an illustration that accurately sums up a lasagna-scented car air freshener, I think that pretty much conveys everything you need to say right there. That's talent.
Well, thank you very much.
Bravo.
It is as good as my singing. I'll leave it at that.
You are a talented guy, Travis, and I'm honored to be around all of you guys and to learn from you guys and hear all these interesting perspectives and different mediums. You know, multimedia is such an interesting thing, and we can learn so many new ways to tell stories.
It's it's one of those things. I've pulled each person that's been on this show for the same base reason, but specific reasons to them. Kevin's a great example of that tonight. So yeah, it's also about showing that diversity of talent and how each person has their own specialty, and it has value and worth no matter how different it is from what I do or what the other guy or the other person does. It all has value. Somebody's going to appreciate what you are doing. So it is after 10 o'clock. We need to wrap this up before Kevin falls off his damn couch. Any final thoughts?
Again.
Real short. Or are we good to say goodnight and throw some outro music?
Tomorrow's another adventure.
There we go.
Always.
Kevin, they all gave thumbs up. You got anything, or are you done?
I'm done.
Okay,
Pleasure.
outro, guys. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. Here's to everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
That's it. Aaron, make sure you tickle the other guys as we do outro music.
Thank you for joining author Travis I. Sivart and the other writers, content creators, and all-around amazing people for our discussion here on Writing Night. Join us again soon, and until you do, make sure you create with passion, enjoy the journey, and remember, every night can be writing.